Hi, I'm going to show you how to make a really simple, tasty rosemary focaccia. I use my cast iron skillet to do it, but when I was on holidays and I wanted to make it for the family, I also picked up one of these smaller cake pans and I increased the recipe by about 1.5 and it worked out just fine. So hang on, I think you're really going to enjoy this. Okay, so today I want to just show you a recipe for focaccia that I really like. And what got me started on this was that in the summertime I bought a cast iron skillet at the market, and I've been cooking a lot of stuff in it, and I really found it really good for making breads in the oven. The first thing I need to do is put the skillet in the oven, warm the oven to 200 degrees Fahrenheit, and the skillet will warm with the oven. The other thing I'm going to do is start off with the yeast, which takes 5 minutes to ferment a little bit. So we started with 3/4 of a cup of warm water, and in that I'm going to add a ½ teaspoon of sugar. Sprinkle it over the top so that it dissolves a little bit. And then the next thing is 1.5 teaspoons of yeast. Now I buy my yeast at the bulk food store. Comes in a little bag like this. This one was $2.88, so it's not that expensive. And as you can see, it's going to make a lot of different breads for that much money. So it's 1.5 teaspoons. These are ½ teaspoons, so I'll put in 3. And we just stir that up a little bit, and it takes about 5 minutes for that to soften and for the yeast to become dissolved. Some of the other ingredients that are required would be garlic. This garlic comes from Wolf Island, which is not far from here. And a big bulb of garlic was 35 cents. Rosemary, this rosemary I get at the bulk food store, and you can buy it in small amounts. This amount was 33 cents when I bought it today, and it's going to make 10 different loaves. Salt, olive oil, flour. My grandmother always used Robin Hood flour, and so I've been buying Robin Hood flour for years and years and years. I have no idea whether it's any better than the rest of it, but it always makes me think of my grandmother whenever I cook anything and I get this yellow bag of Robin Hood flour out. So I'm just going to let this stir for a minute, and when it's dissolved, we'll continue. Okay, so it's been about 5 minutes, and the yeast has softened and bubbled up a little bit in the warm water. And now we start to add some of the other ingredients. The first thing is a cup of flour, so we'll add the flour. And then 3/4 of a teaspoon of salt. And you can either use a mixer to mix the rest of this up, or I just like to use a wooden spoon. So we mix the flour in with the yeast and the water. It's kind of gooey. And once that's mixed together, I add 2 tablespoons of olive oil. I'll mix that in as well. And then the rosemary. Now the rosemary, I actually have a plant of rosemary that I grow on my balcony. And when I started making this in the summertime, I realized that I might want some fresh rosemary to do it during the winter. So I've got rosemary that I keep in the window. And what I usually do is I use a combination of the fresh rosemary and the dried rosemary. The dried rosemary is certainly much easier because you don't have to have the plant. And but I think that the fresh is actually good. It adds a little bit more, I don't know, colorful green to the focaccia, and I particularly like to put it on the top. So I usually cut up a few little leaves of the fresh rosemary and add it like this. And then I take a couple of decent sized pinches of the dried rosemary and I scrunch it up and drop it in so that it mixes in with the batter as well. And then finally, there's another 3/4 of a cup of flour approximately, but this isn't always 3/4 of a cup. Sometimes it doesn't take that much. So it depends really how wet your dough has become. But I just mix this up, and as you add it, you'll start to find that the batter pulls away from the side of the bowl. Add some more. You don't want it to be too wet, but you don't want it too dry either, but it has to be dry enough that you can pat it down a little bit and form a kind of a ball with the batter. It's coming away from the edge now. It looks like I'm going to have to use the 3/4 of a cup. Okay, so this is getting dry enough that it can form into a ball. And what I do now is I'll get the frying pan out of the oven and turn the oven off. So we're going to put the dough into the frying pan, put the frying pan back in the oven so that the yeast can rise, but we're going to have the oven off and warm for that. Now what we do is take a little bit of olive oil, grease up the inside of the cast iron frying pan with some olive oil. And then I just plop this into the pot. And by flouring my fingers, I can pat it down a little bit so that it goes out to the edges of the frying pan. Okay, like so. So we have the dough into the frying pan out towards the edges, and I'm going to cover it with this towel and put it in the warm oven for about 20 to 25 minutes so that the yeast can work and the thing will rise. Once again, remember to turn the oven off because you don't want it to cook, you just want the oven to be warm for the yeast to work. Okay, so while the batter is rising in the oven, you can clean up some of the dishes that you've had at the beginning, and then you can make a little bit of the oil that we're going to put on the top. Now that involves adding 2 tablespoons of olive oil and about 1/4 teaspoon of salt. And then some rosemary, and once again I'll use some of the dried rosemary and some of the green fresh rosemary. And garlic. And the garlic is something that I really enjoy. And it makes it smell so good, makes it taste really good. I've got this garlic today at the market, and it had really big cloves. So usually I would use 2 small cloves of garlic, but that would be way too much I think here. So what I'm going to do is just chop this garlic up into smaller little bits. So I'm just going to add this garlic to the oil and the rosemary and the salt, and we're going to let it sit for the rest of the time that the focaccia is rising in the oven. And then it will be something that's had a chance to blend together a little bit, and we'll add it to the top of the focaccia before we cook it. I like to put a little bit of the fresh on the top because it's greener than the dried stuff. This recipe is something that I ended up looking for because I was visiting a friend in Italy who has a pizza restaurant. Whenever I go visit these people, they always take me to the restaurant, and we have a really nice combination of pizzas. Italians make their pizza very simply, so they don't load up with deluxe pizzas with a whole bunch of stuff. So there's usually one or two toppings. And the one that I really liked almost the best was one that was like this focaccia. And Antonio told me that it was salt, olive oil, rosemary, and garlic that really made it the top. So I kind of found a recipe and adapted a little bit so that I could make it in my pan. So I always think of my friend Antonio whenever I make this as well. The focaccia's had a chance to rise in the oven, and I'm just going to get it out now, and then I'll set the oven to 400 degrees. Be sure to use a pot holder because the handle can be warm. And you can see that it's puffed up and risen a little bit. And now what we're going to do is take the mixture of garlic, rosemary, salt, and olive oil and apply it to the top as evenly as I can. These little chunks of garlic really add flavor. When the focaccia cooks, they end up getting sort of caramelized a little bit, so they come out as crunchy, delicious little nuggets on top of the focaccia. Little moments of delight. It will soak in a little bit as it sits there, and then I always put a few little sprinkles of more coarse sea salt on the top as well, because that adds. I found this recipe to be really great. It's really nice to serve for guests. It makes the place smell really good when it's cooking. Only takes about 15 minutes of actual prep time. The rest of the time it's either rising in the oven or cooking. And it's an easy cleanup, and it's not expensive, and everybody loves it. So highly recommend this recipe. While the oven's ready for the focaccia to go in, here goes. So the cooking time is about 20 to 25 minutes. I'll see you then. Okay, so it's been about 25 minutes. The focaccia's been in the oven. It's all ready to come out. Hope you've had a glass of wine if you're feeling in an Italian sort of mood, or you're getting ready to make your pasta. And I'm just going to take this out of the oven. We'll see what we got. Looks good, doesn't it? Wow. Usually I like to put a little bit of Parmesan on the top as well. Fresh grated Parmesan cheese. Sprinkle it on the top. Not a lot, just a little snowing of it. The place smells really good. This is an easy recipe. It's not expensive, easy to clean up. Everybody likes it, and I think you'll enjoy it. It also comes out of the pan really nicely. And the pan is really pretty clean, and I just clean it all out with a paper towel. So that's easy cleanup as well. It's a little bit hot at the moment, but I'll just show you. This is basically all it takes to clean a cast iron pan. Almost doesn't matter what you cook in it. Just wipe the inside. Sometimes you might have a few things that are crusted on it that you have to chip off, but basically it's clean, ready to go for next time. Well, this is just so good. I can never just wait to dig in. It's great with pasta. It's great by itself. It's really good with some balsamic vinegar and olive oil. Glass of wine.